Okay, good morning. My name is Margaret Graziano, and today we're having a conversation about Mortar, the key to organizational culture. So thank you for being with us. Today is a new day for the world. Every day lately seems like a new day. And if you've been in any of our other programs by Keen Alignment or by Margaret Graziano, you'll know that we have a series of programs ready to enable HR leaders and business leaders in what to do now in the world of work. If you're leading an organization or leading people anywhere, what you are very well aware of is every day it's something new, and we have to be prepared for anything and everything. And we have to be responding, whether it's a national weather crisis or a local weather crisis or peaceful protests or violent protests or the coronavirus spike or the coronavirus return or active shooters or whatever the challenge of the day is. We have to be ready and we have to be prepared of what to do. And now more than ever, in the world of HR, we are called on by the chief executive officers, by the C-suite, to come up with solutions to help them understand what corporate culture is and what to do about the lacking of corporate culture in the workplace. So in today's webinar, the first thing we're going to do is highlight what's wrong or what's not working. Now, some of you might say, well, I already know what's not working. That's why I'm on the call, but we want to make sure that it is clear about all the things, even the things we can't see because our glasses are colored with roses, or the things we choose not to see. And then we'll talk about the Mortar solution, what it means, how to implement it, and then I'll give some case studies of times that we've implemented it. The things that we are recommending you can do by yourself. Everything I know, I've gotten from training I've taken, whether it was the Landmark Forum or LifeSpring or an organizational design degree, coaching and leadership development. Everything I implement in every one of the solutions at Keen Alignment is a learning that I got that then I integrated into the life cycle, into the employment life cycle. We call it strategic people operations. So under everything, I want you to know that my commitment is that you are empowered and trained to bring this to your workplace. So what is Mortar? Mortar begins with motivating and igniting passion. And I know some of the people on this training, because I saw the registrations, work for organizations that have a really powerful mission. The question for you is, are you igniting that mission in the hearts and heads of the people that work for you every day? With the amount of noise that we're facing in the world, with all of it, everything, it's hard for people to remember their why. So great leaders, great managers, great HR professionals need to remember that why and how to integrate it into every step of the employee life cycle. Onboarding and integration. What are we doing to connect people immediately to who we are and why they would want to say yes every day, why they would continue to say yes, and how are we integrating them and socializing them even in a world of distributed workforce or remote worker? How do we connect them to everybody and to everything that they need to be connected to, especially the big picture? How do we identify and rein in unproductive behaviors? In the world of culture, if you've read some of the articles I've placed or follow some of the things that Keen Alignment does, Human Synergistics is the organization we use to identify and map culture. And there's 4 key components to a healthy culture. There's 8 to an unhealthy culture. Healthy is a humanistic environment where inclusivity and diversity isn't something to do, it's a way we're being. Did I just said humanistic? Affiliative, where we're connecting and collaborating and sharing knowledge because it's the right thing to do, not because it's on someone's to-do list. self-actualized, where people feel that their intrinsic motivations are being tapped into at work. So they have this feeling of being self-actualized at work. And then the fourth component is really about being results oriented. Nobody wants to just come to work and churn it out. People at an innate level in their heart, in their spirit, want to feel like they are contributing, like their work matters, like their work is moving the ball forward. Anything against that, anything that gets in the way of that is an unproductive behavior. Power and force is unproductive in the workplace. Perfectionism is unproductive in the workplace. Opposition, arguing for the sake of arguing, ineffective in the workplace. Complacency, leaving everything the way it is, ineffective in the workplace. It's unproductive. Any behavior that is incongruent with the core values is unproductive. So we want to learn how to rein that in, not how to call people out and tell them what's wrong with them and blame and shame them, but how to call people up into their highest level of consciousness so they can connect, again, their desire to the organizational desire. All of this requires training, mentoring, and coaching. If there's anything that I've seen as a disparate mark in the road over this COVID-19 entire experience, and that includes everything and anything that has happened since the day COVID-19 came into our lives, there is a very big difference between organizations who train, coach, and mentor their employees in things like resiliency, in things like tapping into their potential, in things like consciousness and emotional intelligence, and the organizations who just missed the boat. Huge difference in engagement, a huge difference in people feeling safe and secure in what's going on, or in people even being able to say, I don't know what's going on, and I'm okay with that. Training, coaching, and mentoring is critical. Another piece of Mortar is aligning and course correcting. Sorry, lost my glasses. Making sure people know what the priorities are. Making sure that everybody's focused on the same priorities. What's the end game? Where are we headed? At Keen Alignment, our priority is taking what's in my head and giving it to as many people as we can through placing people inside of HR departments, contract and perm, going in and doing workshops, and then giving education like we're doing right now through webinar programs. Everyone in our organization knows our job is to empower alignment and passion and culture, one HR department at a time. That is what we're up to. And then recognizing and fostering momentum. This is about recognizing the small stuff, acknowledging steps in the road along to the goal. Most leaders acknowledge the big wins, but they miss the incremental steps. And then what happens is, because our neural pathways are grooved like a pathway in our brain, most executives and leaders are used to looking at what's wrong, what do we need to fix, what do we need to fix? So people don't have a neural pathway for what's right, what's great, what can we celebrate? And we need to bring that in to our organizations, because that's the only thing that gets people into a high level of operating is momentum. And the only thing that gets you into momentum is positive acknowledgement of what's working. So it would be amiss if I didn't cover the reasons people leave their jobs. 76% of the reason people leave their jobs is for preventable reasons. Things like, there's nowhere for me to go here. Things like, I never stop working, especially now with so many people working remote. Everything's blending. We're at work all the time. We're constantly at work. We're at work when we're not even at work, because we go from this room into that room and we're still on the phone. So work-life balance is the second top reason people leave. Management behavior is number 3. They don't leave jobs, they leave managers. And you could be the nicest manager in the world and hold no one accountable, and the people on your team who want accountability will leave because there's not that there. Compensation and benefits, it is the 4th reason. Now, this could include PTO, it can include incentives, it can include just raw facts we need enough money to survive on. Well-being, this is stress. The lack of well-being is stress, which the National Science Institute for Health and Wellness say that 70% of people right now are saying that they have immense stress in their job, more than before COVID-19. Job characteristics, the right person was hired for the wrong job. The job wasn't laid out appropriately. People didn't tell the truth about what the job really was, not because they're lying, because they were going off of an old job description and they were unclear, or the hiring manager has an idea, but HR or recruiting has another idea. And so the person says, I do, and then it is to a job they're not aligned with. Work environment. Now you might think, well, work environment, no one is going to the office anymore. Work environment exists between the invisible walls, how we talk to each other, how we treat each other. I am very good friends with a millennial, and she's been sharing her challenges in her job with her bosses. It's simple things like how you're tagged in Slack, or how many times the boss follows up with you on the same thing, or the boss asks for input, but doesn't take it. Or we do culture surveys, but we don't address the elephant in the room about the main thing that's not working. That's all work environment. Relocation, retirement, and involuntary are reasons people will leave. What we are finding is that in great cultures, people that want to retire shift how they're working, but they continue to be with that organization and lease their talent. So the Work Institute Retention Report announces that 76% of the reasons people leave have to do with the human system, the health of the human system. That includes the entire employee life cycle. It includes culture, organizational culture. It includes how the leaders be. It's all about the behaviors that are demonstrated, valued, and how people are allowed to treat each other at work, and the systems we have in place, the rules we have in place. Do they foster culture, or do they detract from culture? So one of the things that we have to really understand when it comes to culture is the baby boomers are not only forecasted to leave, they are leaving in droves. And what's left is a mass amount of millennials that, like the youngest millennial, I think right now is 24 and a half years old. They are the majority of the workforce as of 2020. 60% of the workforce are millennials. And then you have your Gen Xers between the ages of 38 and 50. However, there's 50 million fewer of those folks in the United States. Why? Because less people were born. It's not like something happened to them. It was just not the baby boom. When the baby boomers had babies, they became millennials. So we have a big shortage of people in this category of 38 and 50, which is people who've been working for about 15 years, who've been developed and trained and in line to lead. There's less of them. And then we have a whole lot of baby boomers, and COVID-19 has fast forwarded many, many retirements because people are nervous and they just don't want to have to come back to the office. And people are saying life is short. Shoot, there's a virus I could get and just die and never see my family again. I'm not putting up with this corporate BS anymore. And then you have your Zs just entering the workforce. There's Zs that are already working, but the majority of them are not yet in the workforce. And these people, given what's happening in our world today, it will be embedded in their prefrontal cortex and in their neural pathways, social action. We have to have a better healthcare system. We have to have a better social system. We have to have better government. You will see a mass amount of young people getting into industry that makes a difference, more so than the millennials. And that's a big calling of the millennials, collective action, let's make this world better. So we have to adjust. All of these organizations that are being run by baby boomers, that were started by World War II veterans, that have World War II infrastructure, all of it needs to change, and it will definitely change over the next 15 years. It's not going to change tomorrow, but it will change. And the culture that we want to be creating has to deal with the psychographics of the people in the workforce. Demographics is age, where they live, what part of the world they're from, what part neighborhoods they live in, how many people work at a company. Demographics is left hemisphere science. Psychographics is right hemisphere psychology, relationship with the people. So you've got Walter, World War II, who's got a lot of valued traits like stability and structure. You've got Barb Baby Boomer, who's all about team and let's make it fun. And sometimes let's do things the long way because we didn't learn technology fast enough. Speaking for myself and one of my counterparts on the phone or on the Zoom. Then we have Jennifer Gen X or George Gen X. And these folks think everything is messed up and systems will improve. So what happens a lot of time is the leapfrog generation, they like systems. They also like to be independent and left out of the phrase of the boomer. Then we have the millennial, which have been grossly stereotyped as lazy. I like to say that millennials are efficient. They like to get things done without a lot of hubbub. They love technology and they love to use the newest and greatest. And then we have the Z, who's kind of checking everything out and saying, are you guys, both of these groups, by the way, the youngest groups, are challenging us on are we being our values? Every customer I work with, the executive team has been challenged in the last month. What are you doing about the social injustice at work? Didn't come from a baby boomer. Baby boomers didn't even see that it was part of their problem for the most part. Came from the younger generation saying, if I'm going to be part of this company, I want to know what's happening. So again, this is what we're dealing with. And the only way we can make a difference is at our workplace. If people are part of an organization that they feel like is part of the solution, it's the whole reason conscious capitalism became to be, B Corp. It's are we honoring our stakeholders? Are we looking at our external stakeholders and asking ourselves, are we being who we're saying we're being to our customers, to our own people? What is it like? What does it feel like to work here? So some of the constraining factors to an extraordinary culture is leadership. Only 10% of the workforce and only 18% of people in leadership roles told Gallup that they know how to lead, that they're confident in their leadership ability. The vast majority of people don't even want leadership roles because they think the level of responsibility and anguish far outweighs the reward. So we've got to do something about this because, and we have a mass gap, a great amount of pain that people are in leadership roles and they don't feel they know how to lead. So we've got this perfect talent storm. And I know some of you on the call have heard me speak live, and we had this storm before, but there's new things in the wake of the storm. Demographics is an issue for sure. We have 5 generations affecting the workplace, past and future, all converging, different ideas, different philosophies. We've got some people who don't think there's a social injustice problem, while other people say, wake up, it's all social injustice, whether it's Black, white, Hispanic, Asian, women, men, 55-year-olds, 25-year-olds, and people disagree about that. We've got to get people on the same page. We've got the psychographics of what's important to people. We've got disengagement. 70% of people told Gallup poll that if another job came up that fulfilled their intentions for making a difference, they would quit on the dime. We've got a dearth of leadership, no effort being put in most companies on elevating these leaders so they know how to lead people, inspire people, hold people accountable, help people get back on track when they get off track. We have an uncertain economy that is riddling fear through every one of our people in our employee base. We have a pandemic. We have the Me Too movement and the social unrest that is happening across the board. And then we have the increase of artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, and new technologies happening that are exponentially moving faster because of the pandemic. So we got a lot of stuff going on, So I want to do a poll and ask you a question. We'll do this really quick. And it's, what is your biggest people challenge today? And just please fill out the poll and we'll see what you come up with. Is it inclusion, communication in the workforce, COVID-19, remote engagement, accountability for remote workers, alignment towards one focus, or resiliency in the workplace? What do you feel is your biggest challenge? We've got about 22 seconds left. So if everybody wants to participate, that would be awesome. And I'm going to end the poll actually in 10 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And here is our poll results. 38% said communication, 38% said COVID-19, 13% remote engagement, and 38% alignment towards a focused priorities. So thank you for participating in that. So let's talk about the dollars and cents. It cost $617 billion of unwanted turnover in US companies. $617 billion is what it's costing. So for your organization, it's costing 3% of the GDP, or 617 billion is 3% of the GDP. So 3% of your gross sales, your gross revenue, and if you're a nonprofit, whatever your endowment is, it's costing 3% in having the wrong people take jobs or having the right people leave. That is real money, because we put the wrong person in the wrong job for the wrong reason, or we put the right person in the wrong job and then didn't handle it and then they left. So this is a serious, serious financial implication, which if you want to make a difference, you have to be willing and able to communicate in terms of the money it's costing. Now, let's look at organizations that have taken on cultural transformation. Organizations like Microsoft. Microsoft was really in the hole in a bad way. They had 3 different leaders, or 2 leaders after Bill Gates, and both of them ruined their culture. And not until they brought in Satya Nadella, who really is about refreshing the corporate culture, and he brought in Eastern philosophies about unleashing the human spirit at work, about having a bigger stake in the game. Microsoft now has a social cause, and it's Americans with disabilities. They didn't have that before. So now they can tap into people's need to contribute, and they're making software and hardware for people with disabilities, for all people, to democratize the use of software. They have increased their performance by 202%. And other companies like Zappos has done the same, because they emphasized culture. And that doesn't just mean mission, vision, values. That means taking that mission and taking those values and integrating them into every aspect of the human life cycle, of the employee life cycle. It means looking at the way you run meetings. It means looking at how you create priorities and share those priorities, how you tap into the larger system and ask for ideas, all of it. That's what increases performance. As far as earnings, organizations that have a thriving corporate culture earn on average of 147% more than organizations that don't. Why? Because they have actively engaged resources. So I want you to know you already are in our community because you're on this call, but if you don't feel like you get regular communication from Keen, you can tap into 666-866 and you'll be informed of all our webinars and our programs that we're doing, and our placement business that we'll be launching August 1st officially. And Julie, the director of that division, is on the phone now. If we have time, or on the Zoom now, if we have time, we'll have her speak to that. But I wanted to share that. So a great example of culture is a gentleman by the name of Tony Hsieh. He wrote a book called Delivering Happiness. Zappos now has their corporate office in Vegas, and they actually bring people like you and I on tours. I've been there. And then they have a culture workshop of how they created their culture. This isn't hard, but what it does take is a concerted effort, not just by you on the call, on the Zoom, but by a team of people. And that is taking those values, defining those values, and having them be visible through behavior, through how we hire, through how we onboard, through how we coach, through how we evaluate performance, through how we innovate in every element of the companies. So Look up Zappos, look up Delivering Happiness. And it's a great book. And Tony has a great video also on YouTube about creating core values. Then we've got Satya Nadella. Satya Nadella has his own book about, I think it's called Refresh Corporate Culture, or Refresh what he did with Microsoft. He has the tools in that book to tap into the collective. And Microsoft has no big issue with diversity. They have people of color in every kind of role, maybe not as many, and they're working on educating the new generation, but they're a very diverse workplace. And they have people that say, since Satya Nadella came on board, they are a different organization. He is a role model for all of us. So what does it mean to have motivation and to ignite passion? It begins with the purpose of the enterprise. And I'm going to give you an example of our purpose that we just created for our new division, and that's transforming corporate culture one HR department at a time. That's it. It's simple. It's transforming corporate culture, organizational culture, one HR department at a time. That for us, it is a purpose. We're inspired. We're enthusiastic. We know how to do that. It gives everybody that joins Keen Alignment a purpose. All of the consultants that we're bringing on board to go do this, it gives them a purpose and connection from their human spirit. Every human being has a human spirit. It's what gives you breath, passion, excitement. Everybody wants to contribute. And your purpose, whatever your organizational purpose, needs to have people see what they're doing, how one task, one email, one webinar, one phone call, one entry in the database leads to that connection and purpose. And then your managers and you need to know how to inspire, how to ignite that in other people. I'll tell you what, one of my biggest challenges over COVID-19 is coming on these morning calls and being inspirational. And I've had my share of days that I wasn't inspirational and that I needed to be inspired. I also hired a coach for my body and my mind and my spirit, 3 different coaches for the rest of COVID, or however long this is going to last, because I knew going at it alone wasn't enough. So we have to ignite purpose, enthusiasm, purpose, connection in people. And you might say, well, I can't get anybody else enthusiastic that already isn't. You're right, you can't, but you can create the conditions for them to connect to their own passion, their own need to be fulfilled. Every human being has something they want to get fulfilled, and most are now wise enough and waking up that they want to get it done at work, because life is short, and why would you want to be in a job that you can't contribute in and that you can't feel like you're giving your best to? So it's our job. And if we can't be motivated and passionate, my girlfriend Charlotte says, wake up and do 25 push-ups before you get on a phone call with your people. Do the shaking, shake, 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 shake. Meditate, pray, do whatever you got to do so you can give it away and give it to other people. Onboarding is one of the most crucial factors to create culture. People need to know why they said yes. They need to be reminded. Julie and I just put a president in a role, and I talked to her yesterday on her executive debrief to onboard her, and she said, had I known everything that was broken before I took the job, I might not have said yes. So don't be worried about that, Julie. But we're looking at that and how I can support her and how Keen Alignment and Julianne and Lacey can support her, because there's a whole lot of stuff to fix. We need to be honest with people about how broken the environment is. We need to give them a list of everything that's not working so that they don't have to find out on their own. We need to be straight with people. And then when they come on board, we have to continue to inspire them in what's possible. We need to pave the vision for them, to connect them to the big picture, because it's not going to be easy. Someone will do something wrong, say something wrong, annoy them, send them too many emails, confuse them. And we have to continue to bring them back and say, this is the why. Tell us what's not working and we'll fix it. We have to integrate them into understanding what every one of those core values means, why it's important, and how it shows up in behavior, and how it shows up in how we treat each other, how we communicate, how we take feedback, how we empower. I have a client right now who empowerment is one of their core values. However, every time something is happening that she doesn't like, she puts her hand in the pot and keeps it on top of the person's head. And so they know she's on top of it. And how do you think that makes those people feel? They feel like they're trapped, like they're controlled, like they have no self-expression, and she doesn't know she's doing it. I cannot narc it out. Her people have to get the courage to tell her. I can sort through it when they tell her, but I'm not going to say all your people are complaining. They have to say, do you realize that your behavior is causing people to feel micromanaged? That your behavior is extinguishing people's spirit, their fire, their passion. If somebody told me that, I would fix it. I don't want to be doing that. And we got to catch that in the onboarding and the integration process. Reining in unproductive behaviors. So we've talked about this at the beginning, but I want to go deeper. There's something about high standards and there's something about high expectations. Have standards of performance, but don't expect people are going to know what they are. High expectations almost always cause breakdowns because there's a perception that there's agreement, but maybe there was no agreement because it wasn't the standard. So high expectations, and they're unfulfilled because we didn't communicate that these are the standards of performance. Good intentions are thwarted because bad behavior thwarts them. So I could have the best intentions, but I'm having a bad day. I lost a client or lost a contract or broke up with my boyfriend or didn't eat the right smoothie for breakfast or drink the right smoothie or didn't do my push-ups. So my good intentions go caca because I'm having a bad day, and so they're thwarted. Or I've got communication and our company needs communication, but we're so busy we don't deliver it. In the absence of communication, people make things up. In the absence of defined behavior that hits a standard, people don't know how to be, so they just be the way they've always been. And then the loudest personality shows up at work, or the most coercive personality, or covert, like passive aggressive. In human synergistic circumplex, which is the constructive culture versus destructive culture, passive aggressive is one of the most popular ways of having a broken culture because nobody says what they need to say, but they say it behind everybody else's back. Undelivered communications. Or we ask a question and we give people no time to respond. So they respond when they're done with the meeting, and then we have the meeting after the meeting, which never works. So we've got to have standards that we hold people accountable for. We have to have behaviors, not intentions. I mean, intentions are really good to create an intention, but behaviors have to back it up. Actions have to back it up. And we have to have a system for regular communication. Training, coaching, and mentoring. McKinsey released a report at the beginning of this year and said training will be the biggest downfall of organizations who missed the boat. We cannot be adding all of this new technology in without teaching people basic things like people readiness. Most of the millennials and the new generation coming in Z report that they do not feel like they have this, or they don't have the skills or the passion to lead because the people who have made the example for them did not do a great job. And it just doesn't look like it's worth the challenge. So we have to teach them. We have to give them people readiness. We have to give people resilience training. We took 2 million people and put them, or more, and said work remote, that have never worked remote before. We didn't teach them how to do it. We didn't teach them how to plan their work and work their plan. We didn't give them the tools. We didn't teach them how to set up a workspace. We're now, oh my God, we didn't do this and we didn't do that. But we have to make training and people readiness and resiliency and adoption of technology that needs to be mainstay. Emotional intelligence, how to tell when you're off the rails and how to apologize. Brene Brown just did a beautiful training on how to apologize. Now, her examples were personal relationships like mom and daughter, but we need to be apologizing at work when we don't do what we said we would do, when we don't keep our word, when we cause a problem, even though we didn't mean to do it. We've got to clean it up and own it. And we got to teach people how to do that. We have to learn how to be coaches and mentors, not just managers. Next is alignment. So I use the sailboat because if you're in a sailboat and your rudder is not pointed in the right direction, you will be certain not to get there. If you do not have an island or a destination spelled out, everyone will be working, but in service of what? I've seen it in my own organization, especially with COVID. You know, my job was doing public workshops, going and doing level sets. That my goal this year was I'm going to do 24 level sets. I'm going to do all these public speaking. Well, 3 days into COVID-19, everything was canceled. And I had to look at what are we doing? What are we up to? How are we going to contribute to the mission of transforming the world of work into places people want to go and places people can be themselves at and contribute at their highest level? How are we going to do that if we can't go out and talk to people? So we came up with we're going to teach and place and contract inside of companies hour by hour by hour, whatever they can afford, and give them what they need so they can do it themselves. That's our island. Now, everything Lacey's doing has to be aligned with that island. Everything Stephanie's doing has to be aligned with that island. Everything Julie's doing, Hem is doing, everybody has to be aligned with that. And if they're not, we have to get them back on track. And it's not like you're bad, you're wrong, you're off track. It's what are you working on? And does it serve the larger mission? And does it serve our top 3 priorities that we're working on this month? And if it doesn't, if you're not sure why you're doing what you're doing, speak up. Let us know what we're doing wrong. Let us know where you're getting confused and we'll stop it. But, you know, I didn't say this yet, but I'll say it now. We must have open, transparent, and trustful communications in order for people to really speak about what's going on. That's a different webinar. But none of this will work if people don't have trust. So recognizing and fostering when it's right. There's 6 operating states that determine where an organization is at in terms of effectiveness and efficiency. And the first is formulation. The second is concentration. So formulation, you're putting all the systems in place. How are we going to hire? How are we going to reward? How are we going to onboard? What's our mission? What's our vision? What are our values? That's formulation. Then is concentration, doing the hard work to roll it out. We're being very cerebral. Then comes momentum. And we've got high momentum and low momentum. And in high momentum, every 3 ounces of effort turn 1 pound of result. That's in high momentum. In low momentum, it's 10 to 1. So you got to do 10 things to get 1 result. You have to recognize everything people are doing that's moving the ball forward. Let's say Mary Jane Johnson works at your company and Mary Jane has been doing nothing but complaining because her kids are screaming and she doesn't have a good seat, and Mary Jane hires a part-time nanny. Acknowledge that. Mary Jane buys a new chair. Acknowledge that, because it's all things Mary Jane is doing to take ownership for her performance. The leaders of every organization, including all of the people on this training, need to acknowledge when somebody has a better way of improving their performance. Everyone wants to be in momentum. A company that is operating in full momentum is breaking records. They're in innovation. They're operating at the highest levels of organizational effectiveness, and their state of mind is in engagement, innovation, and synchronicity. And you would much rather work in a culture dispersed or live, remote, or with people every day, touching them, not touching them today, but you know what I mean. You'd much rather work in an environment where people are up to something than people are complaining, they're frustrated, they're afraid, or they're hopeless. And we can control that through owning the culture of our department, our organization, or the whole culture. So my first foray into a major cultural transformation, I was doing projects for a long time, 10 years. But we had a company that were really messed up. They were 140 years old. They had old ways of doing things, and their people did not feel connected to any purpose. They actually did surveys that they felt like they were cogs in the wheel, and it was command and control environment. And the general manager himself and the head of HR called me and said, we're in trouble. We realize we're in trouble. 1/3 of our population is retiring in the next 5 years, and we don't know how to be a 21st century organization. Their courage and their ability to admit that they didn't know what they didn't know and they needed help was amazing. And that was a project that I took on, me and my company. It took us a year or 2 years to get them to stabilization mode. Before that, we were working with this organization here, this organization here, this organization here, this organization here, and we were doing leadership training, or we were doing strategic hiring, or we were doing executive placement, or a piece. But this organization needed it all. Since then, we've worked with over 25 companies at that level and have had magnificent results. Here's what we did, and these are things you can do too. We had an offsite, and in this offsite, it was 2 days of talking and of open sharing about everything that wasn't working. And it took a half a day just to get people comfortable to tell the truth. And they told the truth. And they weren't blaming or shaming anybody. They were coming from a level of responsibility where they could own it, but they called out all of the things that weren't working about the leadership team and about how the leadership team was interacting with the rest of the organization. That's where it began. They created a leadership team credo, and then they went out into a ropes course and challenged themselves personally on who they were declaring they were as leaders. And it was absolutely one of the most inspiring experiences of my life. People were on telephone poles 30 feet in the air and declaring, I am an empowering leader, and then jumping off. We didn't have to facilitate that, but they didn't have anybody there who knew how to do it, so they hired us to facilitate that. Then during that process, which we call a level set, we began to get to work about what needs to happen to fix this. So we know everything everyone's complaining about. What are the top 10 things we're going to do in the next year to fix this? How are we going to open the lines of communication? How are we going to empower people? And as a result of the level set, we came back 6 weeks later and did a strategic advance. In this strategic advance, we created the mission of the organization. They had not had a compelling mission before then. The purpose. Then they created their core values. And we do a lot of experiential learning. So it's not just me and my co-facilitators, shouting at people or telling them what to do. We elicit their input. And as a team, they created their core values. And then not just the core values, but what they meant. What were the behaviors? How would they know that people were actually living those core values? And even more, how would they know that they were living those core values? What were their operating ways of being? Then they created the top 10 priorities for the next year. Everybody had accountability. People owned them. Then from that, they created task force teams that would be part of their culture coalition who would move these initiatives forward. Then Tiffany, this is her right here. She was at that time expecting her third child, and she took on strategizing her whole HR department and recreating it from an organization that was the complaint department, where people would show up and put their bag of complaints on her front door, to the department that was there to do something about it, to be the conduits, the owners of culture. And they looked at every people process in the employee life cycle. Specifically, we partnered with them and linked 60 of their unique roles to the big picture. We call it role alignment, and we did a role analysis for 60 roles, and during that process, we taught their role alignment team, I think at that time they had 7 people, to do this internal. So that is the commitment of Keen, is to empower you all to do this in your own workplaces. When there's no more work for me to do, then I will go off and retire and write books. And the vision is that I am giving it away, teaching people to do it so they could do that, like we did with Tiffany and her team. In role alignment, every role gets a purpose. Every single role is connected to the organizational purpose. So let's say the purpose of HR is to own constructive corporate culture. That is the purpose of HR. Now, that's not what they said, but I'm giving you one that could be. And so let's say the HR generalist would be to realign every step in the employee life cycle to be congruent with our mission, vision, and values. So every role has a purpose, and then every role has key performance indicators that roll up into the organizational success measures, so everything's in alignment. So if the job could talk, what would the job say it needed in terms of purpose, in terms of results, in terms of focus? How is the role focused so the role can deliver the end result? What happens in a lot of organizations is there are no priorities. Everything's a priority. And so the typical HR department is running around like chickens with their heads cut off. And by 5 o'clock in the evening, when they finally have an hour to work on strategy, they're completely and utterly exhausted. As a matter of fact, when I spoke for SHRM last year, 70% of the people in the room said they do not have time to be strategic because their departments are not structured in a way that they have enough people doing the admin stuff and enough people doing the low-level stuff. So companies are just not putting a priority on this. But I also think it's because the CEO or the CFO or whoever's in charge doesn't understand the amount of effort it's really going to take to have culture be the competitive advantage. And it takes a lot of time. It takes, we see all these jobs right now, culture owner, diversity and inclusion owner, and they have 27 things in the job responsibility, and they're giving the person less than an hour a week to work on what they say is important. We have to call that out. We have to start bringing it to the attention that if you want me to do something well, I should have focus of no more than 3, maybe 4 things, and I need to have at least 35 hours a week to do that. And we got to start telling the truth about that. That's role alignment. Next is leadership training. Whoopsie, sorry. 21st century leadership training or any kind of leadership training. I believe, and I am a strong stand for this because my whole career started with my whole career outside of recruiting started with self-awareness training. Who was I being? What was not working about the way I ran my recruiting company? I had to take responsibility for my cause in the matter of people's performance. And that was about a 4-year journey, and I'm still on it. I told you I just hired 3 coaches. So it begins, leadership development begins with self-awareness. Then there's 2 prongs. How do I pivot and adjust when I'm triggered? And how do I be responsible for my response? And how do I shift it? How do I self-correct? How do I course correct quickly? And how do I see the big picture? So being response agile means I have to understand my role, who I am as a human being. I have to know what my own self-esteem is, and I have to know where I'm going. And then response agility is the adjustment of that rudder on the sailboat so that I can get where I'm going. And whole systems thinking is I have to be able to see the people that work for me and the people that I serve, my stakeholders, my clients. I have to see them as unique people. I have to understand the work that has to get done, the to-do list, and I have to know how every move I make, every step I take, I'm not going to start singing the police, but how everything I do impacts the big picture. If I flip a light switch, how many other light switches does that flip? And am I flipping the right light switch? Some people don't understand whole systems thinking. Some people just haven't been in jobs where they have been trained to see the big picture. Your leadership training has to allow that. Also have to really work on the personal accountability. What does it mean to hold myself into account? What does it mean to not go into the shame and blame game with myself or others? See, I can't be helpful to others if I'm not helpful to myself. If I'm constantly telling myself who I'm not, if I have no personal boundaries, if I'm beating myself up, if my rhetoric in my already always thinking or my looped neural pathways are what I'm not, I am going to project that out onto other people, whether I like it or not. So it begins with the self. The whole first part of the training, I highly recommend that you work on the whole person. Most coaching programs are about the whole person. And then teaching people about neuroscience, about this thing called our executive brain, that we have a right hemisphere and a left hemisphere. Right hemisphere is creativity, freedom, connection with other human beings, innovation. Left hemisphere is logic, practicality, rules, and structure. We can't lead lopsided. We can't be all right, let's have fun and games and play and do art and paint and love each other. We actually have to have some rules and some job descriptions and some structure, and we have to be able to integrate that. We have to teach people about their brain. We have to teach people about the amygdala and how it completely puts people into a hijack and has them not be present. We have to teach people how to get themselves back on track through something like resiliency training. And then we have to teach them how to turn on their superpowers and their leadership through identifying with their core values, which is self-awareness. And then we have to teach them to retrain the brain. Retrain the brain. When I was in recruiting, so I'm aging myself, but that's okay, because my goal is to age gracefully, with freedom and power and self-expression. But in 1983, when I got into recruiting, I was told by my boss, you can't change people, so just put the right person in the job. And my whole career was about the right person, the right person, the right person. And even when I started my software company, it was right person, right job. When I got my coaching certification, they introduced me to something called neuroscience. And for the first time in my life, at 45 years old, I was trained that we can rewire our brains. Now, I can't rewire your brain. You can't rewire your manager's brain, but they can rewire their own brain if the passion and the commitment and the diligence is there. And that's what neuroplasticity teaches. So let's get into the human system transformation. How we do that. We have to look at every process that touches the people. First of all, the human beings that work for your enterprise are a system. You have technology systems, you have people systems. Any system of more than one person is a human system. You have a relationship to people. The human system is the third piece. If you two don't communicate, your human system is not constructive. I have an organization. In my organization, 5 people work regularly, 10 people work when I have work for them. That is a human system. Your organization is a human system, and it is dynamic. It cannot be programmed by a computer like your technology system can. It is dynamic, it is always changing, and it is based on sociology. So Harari is a great author. He's a social scientist, also Malcolm Gladwell. They have lots of great books. Harari's book is called Sapiens, A Brief History of Mankind. And Malcolm Gladwell wrote a book called Blink, and he wrote another book called Outliers. And those books will start to point to the social science that we have to be understanding in order to create culture. But for this purpose, this is about the people systems that honor the human system. That's recruitment, onboarding, performance management, offboarding, leadership development, coaching, training. This sets the stage for how people relate to the organization. We have to look at every single element of this, including health and well-being, stress management. The National Science Institute says people are off the rails more than any other time in history right now. Well, in our history. We weren't around in 1910, so we don't know what happened. And the world wasn't the way the world is, but in our history, all of our lives, this has been the big, oh my God, what am I gonna do? For everybody, economically, health-wise, stress-wise. The social uprising, I don't think it's an accident that it happened on the heels of COVID or in the middle of COVID. I think it's all part of it. It's all part of how they distributed that money, who didn't get the money, and all of it. There will be books written about this. The people right now, famous authors are at home writing, these social scientists, they will be addressing this. But we have to look at everything we're doing, including our retention plan. Another word for this is called talent strategy, our talent strategy has to be in alignment with our mission, vision, and values. Actually, everything does. The way we're training leaders, the way we're rewarding people, all of it. It's all got to be in alignment or it's not going to happen. I highly recommend, if culture is on your radar, create a culture coalition, a task force. Their job is to evaluate culture, report on culture, find out what's not working with culture, get people to talk to them. The organizations that are doing it right don't just put the onus on HR. HR is part of this, but they don't own it, because there will be a mistrust. Now, when I say they don't own it, I mean they don't own it entirely alone, solo, because there will be a mistrust. If they make a promise and then the management team is not fulfilling that promise, then you only got one person who can hold them accountable. You need a team that can sit with managers and can say, you know, just like in sororities, how they used to have the system where they'd bring people up and they on charges, let's say, and they'd have a jury of peers. The coalition is like a jury of peers. This is what we're not doing that we said that we would. So either we're going to stop making promises or we're going to fix it. It's got to be a team of people. It's the only way I've seen it work. And then those people need training. So for Klaus specifically, in the 2 years we work with them, they reduced turnover from 9.0 of salaried people to 6.9. I can unfortunately say since we've stopped working with them, that has gone up. And it was only because they cut short. HR did not want to stop working with us, but the Culture Coalition was bringing things to the attention of the general manager that the general manager didn't want to hear. And so it was too painful. So that is a you'll read all about it in Harvard Business Review about the companies that start culture and stop culture because they're unwilling to make the long-term changes. They had a 6.6 rise in revenue in the time we were working with them, 2.6 rise in gross profit, 1.5 rise in net profit, and a 1.4 increase in profits. So here's the thing. In order to sustain this, you don't need to keep Keen Alignment or any other consultant around. You need to make sure that your CEO is doing the work. And everyone is saying that right now. Every publication, if they're not, it won't work. And you need to make sure whoever is the stakeholder in HR has full partnership from the CEO. So to complete, the 6 C's of shaping culture is moving from complacency to curious, moving from we've got it all handled, we're great, to you know what, there's things that aren't great. We've got some social injustices happening in our own company. It's all men making decisions, or it's all women making decisions, or it's all white people in leadership, or it's all men over the age of 50. We've got to go into curiosity and start shining the light on what's not working and asking questions, not blaming. Telling everybody in your company they're racist is not a way to get enrollment. Asking, what do you guys think about white fragility, is a great way to create enrollment. Asking, what do you think our culture is and how do you think we're doing? And then making a commitment. We're going to do this and it's going to be a 2-year process. It's going to be a 3-year process. I can promise you, cultural transformation is not a 1-year gig or a 2-year gig. It's probably a 4 or 5-year investment. But you do not have to invest in outside consultants. You can get your people trained. You yourself can enroll in coaches training, enroll in culture training, enroll in organizational development training, and get moving forward. And then it's catalyzing. And the only way to catalyze is to get a group. The C-suite must be bought in. The HR team must be empowered. And then you need other people, a jury of peers that are going to carry the water and hold accountability. And then you need to look at, I would like to change this, but it's not a C, so stakeholder centric. Everything's got to be, if we're saying this for our customer, are we being it inside? And then it's an ongoing, continuous improvement effort, and we have to measure. We have to start the whole thing off with an assessment. We recommend ideal culture versus actual culture. And then we need to keep measuring in the same vein. I have organizations who've really messed this up because they're always changing the survey questions. So they're always moving the mark. And then they're doing the survey and then people aren't telling them the truth. The surveys on culture need to be done outside the organization or by your culture coalition, not by the HR department. So on that note, we are completing. Thank you so much for your time. Unfortunately, we do not have time for Q&A. I appreciate your attention. I acknowledge you for taking time out of your stressful, busy schedule to participate with us today. And maybe we'll see you tomorrow on Got Culture. Thank you. And thank you, Julianne. Wave to everybody so they know who's running our new division of strategic HR insourcing. We will be putting people inside organizations to do this who don't have my price tag on their head. Thank you. Bye.